Imagine standing in a supermarket on a weekend afternoon. You want to buy something simple, a bottle of cooking oil, or perhaps a small part for your broken laptop. But the shelf is empty. What do you feel then? Annoyance? Certainly. But beneath that annoyance is a vague chill, the feeling that why does a system so modern, so massive, fail to provide something so basic? We often live with the illusion that the economy is a perpetual machine, solid as concrete. But Wasily Leontief, the Russian-born man with sharp eyes, the 1973 Nobel laureate, spent his life proving a much scarier truth. The economy is not concrete. It is a spider web. Touch a thread in Moscow, and a fly quivers in New York. A factory shuts down in China, and the price of the car you plan to buy in Vietnam skyrockets by 20%. Leontief was the first to map out that spider's web. He didn't view the world through the lens of political slogans or frantically dancing stock charts. Instead, he peered into the anatomical structure of civilization itself. Once you understand how he saw the world, you will never look at your morning coffee the same way again. You will find a sweet fatalism in realizing that your financial destiny sometimes doesn't rest in your hands, but in the hands of a miner on a continent you have never set foot on. Do you truly believe you are in control of your own life? Or are you merely a small link being pulled along by invisible forces?
To understand why Leontief is hauntingly important, we must go back in time, not to list dates, but to smell the gunpowder and the chaos of history. Vasily Leontief was born in St. Petersburg, growing up amidst the storm of the Russian Revolution. He witnessed the collapse of an old order and the painful rise of a new one. He left the Soviet Union in 1925, carrying in his luggage not just clothes, but the gnawing question of a young intellectual. How do we organize a society without falling into chaos? In the West at that time, economists were intoxicated by abstract theories. They sketched intersecting supply and demand curves on blackboards, trusting that the invisible hand would sort everything out. But Leontief, haunted by memories of empty shelves and stagnant factories back home, had no faith in such ambiguity. He was ruthlessly pragmatic, a man of intellectual superiority. To him, economics was neither poetry nor moral philosophy. It was engineering. Just as an engineer studies the blueprints of an aircraft, Leontief demanded specifics. To produce 1 ton of steel, exactly how much coal, how much electricity, and how many labor hours are required. He didn't care how you felt about the market, he cared about how the system functioned under the hood. His arrival in America was like a surgeon walking into a room full of faith healers operating on blind belief. He brought with him the sharpest scalpel of all, data. But what story can raw data tell about human destiny? Can cold, hard numbers truly predict the collapse of empires?
In 1973, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences awarded the Nobel Prize to Leontief for the development of the input-output analysis method. Sounds dry, doesn't it? Input, output. It sounds like a boring accounting term that makes you want to doze off. But wait, don't let the name fool you. This is one of the most powerful tools ever created to control the real world. Picture this. Before Leontief, the economy was like a black box. We knew money went in and goods came out, but no one knew what happened inside. Leontief smashed that box open. He constructed a colossal matrix. The horizontal rows represented production sectors: agriculture, steel, automotive, textiles. The vertical columns tracked exactly what those sectors consumed. For the automotive industry to build a car, it must buy steel from the steel sector, rubber from agriculture, and glass from chemicals. But wait,
For the steel industry to provide that steel, it needs to buy machinery from the mechanical sector and electricity from the energy sector. Suddenly, you are hit with an overwhelming truth. No one is independent. This validates a deep-seated suspicion you often try to ignore. Your success is not entirely down to your own hard work. If the energy sector sneezes, your business, even if it has nothing to do with power plants, can catch pneumonia. Leontief's work at that time, through the 30s, 40s, and peaking with his 1973 Nobel Prize, was akin to humanity discovering the map of DNA for the first time. Before him, we treated economic ailments by fumbling in the dark. Now, we could see the very veins and arteries of the system. But Leontief's greatness lay not just in drawing the map, but in warning us of the price of that connectivity. A price that in 1973, the very year he accepted his Nobel Prize, the world paid in blood and tears. When the whole world is bound together, freedom is merely an illusion. Are you ready to see the invisible chains shackling your feet? Why was the 1973 Nobel Prize so iconic? It was the year of the oil crisis. Recall or imagine gas stations in the US and Europe hanging out of gas signs, lines of people stretching endlessly in desperation, prices climbing by the hour. The Western economy, once proud to be invincible, suddenly collapsed just because an oil valve was turned off in the Middle East. At this moment, Leontief's model was no longer academic theory. It became a prophecy. While politicians panicked and traded blame, Leontief and his matrix could pinpoint exactly how an oil shortage would spread like a virus through the economy's bloodstream. It wouldn't just bring cars to a halt, it would drive up the cost of fertilizer, made from oil, which would inflate food prices, eventually triggering strikes by textile workers as the cost of living spiraled. He revealed to the world a righteous anger, the realization that human suffering is not random. It is the result of a system designed to be so tightly interwoven that risk propagates faster than profit. Leontief proved that in a modern economy, stability is merely a thin veneer concealing the chaos waiting to explode.
Part 1. Anatomy of the Economic Monster. 1. The recipe for everything. Forget the grandiose macroeconomic terms for a moment. To understand Leontief, think of a kitchen. If you want to bake a cake, you need a recipe. 2 eggs plus 500 grams of flour plus 100 grams of sugar equals 1 cake. Simple, right? But Leontief asked a much crazier question. What is the recipe for a jet fighter? It's not just aluminum and glass. To get aluminum, you need electricity. To get electricity, you need coal. To get coal, you need excavators. To get excavators, you need steel. And to get steel, you need electricity again. It is an infinite loop. Leontief was the first person with the patience and the transcendent intellect to write down the cooking recipe for the entire economy. He called it technical coefficients. This is where you should feel a sense of intellectual superiority. When an ordinary person looks at an iPhone, they just see a touchscreen. But through Leontief's lens, you see a massive matrix. 0.002 grams of gold from Peru, 0.5 units of shipping services from Singapore, 0.01 units of insurance services from London. Why does this matter to you? Because it reveals a naked truth. No product is independent. When you buy a cup of coffee, you are triggering a chain reaction that ripples all the way to the coal mines in Vietnam or the fields in Brazil. Leontief transformed economics from a vague philosophy into a precise science. He proved that if the government wants to increase car production by 10%, they must ensure the electricity sector grows by 2% and the steel sector by 5%. If not, the system collapses. There is no magic, only cold mathematical balance. 2. The Leontief paradox, a slap in the face of assumptions. In the 1950s, before winning the Nobel, Leontief dropped a bombshell on the academic world, something that later became known as the Leontief paradox. At that time, dominant economic theory held that a capital-rich country, money, machinery, like the US, would export capital-intensive goods, like airplanes, machinery, and import labor-intensive goods, like clothing, shoes. Sounds logical, doesn't it? It was the ironclad belief of every expert. But Leontief didn't believe in beliefs. He believed in data.
He ran his input-output model on real U.S. data, and the results stunned everyone. The U.S. was actually exporting labor-intensive goods and importing capital-intensive goods. The result was so shocking that many thought he had miscalculated, but he wasn't wrong. He pointed out that American labor was not like labor elsewhere. It was high-skilled, high-productivity labor. What is the lesson for us? Never completely trust textbook theories or the advice of financial pundits on TV. Skepticism. Reality is always far more complex and ironic. Leontiev taught us that only when we dissect the data to the very end can we see the true face of the economic monster. 3. The impotence of planning. There is a tragic irony in Leontiev's life. He was born in Russia, a place that worshipped the centrally planned economy, where the state decides what to produce. His input-output method was the dream of every planner, a tool to calculate society's exact needs, eliminating the waste of the free market. But it was Leontiev himself, upon moving to the U.S., who realized that this matrix is too complex for anyone to control. Even with today's supercomputers, calculating billions of connections that change every second is impossible. The attempt to control the entire economy with a spreadsheet, no matter how great, will inevitably lead to gridlock. This is where fatalism creeps in. We're living in a system too big to understand and too complex to control. Whether it's the government or multinational corporations, everyone is just trying to surf the massive waves of data that Leontiev saw, but no one is truly steering the ship. We are entrusting our fate to chaos disguised as order.
Part 2. The Age of Rupture, when the matrix is unplugged. 1. The domino effect, from a virus to your car. Do you remember the global semiconductor shortage fever of 2021? You wanted to buy a new car, but the dealer told you the wait was 6 months. Why? Chip shortage, they said. You wanted to buy a PlayStation 5 for your son, but the black market price tripled. Why? Chip shortage. This is Leontiev's nightmare come into life. In today's flat world, corporations have optimized supply chains to the extreme to save costs, just in time. They eliminated all redundant inventory. But Leontiev warned 50 years ago, maximum efficiency means zero flexibility. Look at the matrix. A chip packaging plant in Malaysia closes due to COVID-19. The chip manufacturing sector in Taiwan faces an output bottleneck. The auto assembly industry in Germany lacks a component worth just $1. A billion-dollar production line in Detroit halts operations. And the final result? You in Vietnam have to pay an extra 100 million VND to get a car immediately. The feeling of fear here is not about ghosts. It is the fear of powerlessness. We realize that our civilization is not built on a solid foundation, but is suspended by thin threads stretched across oceans. A single ship stuck in the Suez Canal is enough to make the whole world hold its breath. What Leontiev taught us is that geographical distance is dead, but risk distance is zero. You are sharing risk with the entire world, whether you like it or not.
2. Green Leontiev, the Earth's accountant. But Leontiev's greatest legacy for the 21st century is not just about supply chains. It is about the survival of this planet. In his later years, Leontiev did something revolutionary that few noticed at the time. He added a new row and column to his input-output table. That row was named pollution. Before Leontiev, economists often treated pollution as externalities, something happening on the sidelines, not in the accounting books. Businesses counted coal costs, labor costs, but not the cost of smoke released into the sky. Leontiev said, wrong. Nature is also a supplier. He expanded the model to calculate precisely. To generate $1 million GDP from the textile industry, how many tons of toxic wastewater will we discharge? To get 1 ton of steel, how much clean oxygen do we withdraw from the atmosphere? Here is the intellectual superiority for you. Debates about climate change are often full of emotions and slogans. But with Leontiev's method, we can turn it into a fair accounting problem. We can calculate the true cost of the shirt you are wearing. If we include the cost of treating the wastewater that the textile factory dumped into the river,
which they didn't pay for but society pays for with sickness, then that shirt is not as cheap as its price tag. Leontief shows us a brutal but necessary truth. There is no free lunch, and there is certainly no free growth. We have been borrowing from nature for too long, and Leontief's balance sheet is showing that it is time to pay the debt.
3. Complexity beyond reach. Today we have big data, AI, and supercomputers. We think we have surpassed Leontief's era. But in reality, we need him more than ever. The modern economy has become so complex that no single human mind can encompass it all. Financial derivatives, cryptocurrencies, multi-tiered supply chains all create a chaotic matrix a billion times larger than the spreadsheets of the past. Fatalism sets in when you realize even heads of central banks or presidents are driving in the fog. They only see a tiny fraction of the global input-output picture. When a crisis hits, like in 2008 or 2020, they pump money in, hoping it flows to the right places. But according to Leontief's theory, that money flows through millions of capillaries, and sometimes it accumulates in places that cause asset bubbles instead of helping the poor. Have you ever wondered why the government prints relief money, but vegetable prices at the market rise while your salary stays stagnant? That is the Leontief matrix operating in a way that no one can control.
Part 3. The Cartographer's Final Word. We are not alone. We are tethered. In the end, what did Wassily Leontief teach us? He taught us that independence is a myth. In the modern economic world, the concept of self-reliance is impossible. You cannot grow your own rice, weave your own fabric, manufacture your own phone, and cure your own diseases all at once. We live thanks to millions of strangers. The breath of the economy is the collective heartbeat of billions of people. When looking at the input-output table one last time, don't just see numbers. See the invisible strings. The string connecting your wallet to an oil field in Arabia. The string connecting your dinner to a drought in Ukraine. The string connecting your job to an algorithm in Silicon Valley. The fatalism here carries a philosophical beauty. We are cells in a colossal body. A cell cannot survive if separated from the body, but it must also endure the pains of the entire body. A warning for the future. Leontief passed away in 1999, just before the 21st century began. But his ghost still haunts every meeting of the G7, G20, or the World Economic Forum. His warning echoes still. If you do not understand the structure of the machine, do not try to turn the wheel too hard. We are living in an era where politicians and business leaders often make decisions based on emotion or short-term gain. They impose tariffs, they sanction, they pump money, forgetting that each of those actions will create tsunamis in places they never expected. Leontief left us not with an answer to every problem, but with humility. The necessary humility before the grand complexity of human civilization. Respect the connections. Understand that your smallest action is part of an ocean of data that is constantly in motion.